I once had a mentor say to me, if exercise could be packaged in a pill, it would be the number one selling pharmaceutical in the world. Now, he was talking about it from a physiotherapy standpoint in improving people's pain, improving people's function. But it's also true in the longevity sense. Exercise can improve your ability to live for a long time and to live a high quality life. And that's what we're going to be going through today in today's video. So there's two factors really when we are talking about exercise that are modifiable in the sense that we can do on a daily basis or, close to a daily basis. And that is resistance training and cardiovascular training, or as we'll see, improving your VO2 max has been shown to improve your longevity. We're going to be covering the resistance training side of things first. And to do that, we're going to be going through a study, a research article, and it is titled Resistance Training and Mortality Risk, a Systematic Review and Meta-Analysis, and it was done in 2022. So last year now. This is filmed on the 1st of January. So it included 10 studies, and what it found was that for somebody who is resistance training up to 60 minutes per week, which is not much, it's, one session of 60 minutes or two sessions of 30 minutes per week, they found a 27% reduction in all-cause mortality, meaning a 27% decrease in death at any point. They also found a 19% decrease in cardiovascular risk, meaning dying from cardiovascular events. And they also found a 15% decrease in cancer risk, meaning 15% decrease in dying from cancer. Some pretty crazy stats, really. And I don't think we've found a pharmaceutical product which has been able to emulate that necessarily. We have some specific statins which reduce cholesterol and, sort of medications like that help to limit the chance. But we're talking about modifiable factors, something you don't have to ingest yourself. It is within your body's natural capabilities to heal itself. That was a really interesting study that I found with that. And I suppose, that's probably where my training has sort of geared towards, is more around longevity. It used to be particularly strength and muscle building. And it still is them factors to a point. But the number one factor for having a fall, for example, is firstly having had a fall in the past, and secondly, not having the strength in order to keep yourself up. Training yourself around, are you doing squats? Are you doing lunges? Are you increasing your lower body strength? Hate to use this term, but core strength as well. Are you utilizing your posterior chain, your glutes, your hamstrings, your lower back in order to keep you upright and to keep you balanced? Those are the things that I've shifted my training towards, to actually focus on that more so than muscle building and purely strength. It's more for the longevity benefits now. That was the first study that I wanted to go through. The second one was a very large study, and I'll just pull it up here. And it was titled Association of Cardiovascular Fitness with Long-Term Mortality Among Adults Undergoing Treadmill Testing. They're talking about VO2 max, so grouping people into VO2 max categories. And so they did that by having what you call like your elite, your high, your above average, and your below average and low. And then they group these as far as percentiles. So your below average was in your 25 to 50 percentile. Your average was in your 50 to 75 percentile. Your high was your 75 to 95 percentile. And your elite category was the top 5%, so 95 to 100 percentile. And what they found, interestingly, the higher this VO2 max on the scale, the less likely you are to die of all-cause mortality. Now, This study was conducted in 2018, and it was a cohort study. So it followed the subjects for a number of years, and it had 122,000 participants in it with an average age of 53. And so what they found was, interestingly, probably the key point, and I listened to this podcast with Joe Rogan and Dr. Peter Attia probably in 2021, I think it was. And Dr. Peter Attia said that if you are in the elite category, you are at a 5 times less chance of dying from all-cause mortality compared to somebody who's in the low category. And that really sort of stood out for me, and I wanted to do some extra research and see where he pulled that number from. Anyway, ended up finding the study, and this was the study that he was talking about. We've got some pretty interesting variables that will pop up on the video here. But basically, you've got all your comparisons between your low versus elite, which was a 5 times less chance of dying from all-cause mortality. Low versus high was a 3.9 times. Low versus above average, 2.7 times. Low versus below average, 1.95 times. So even just in that sort of going in that low to below average, we see a 1.95 times decrease risk of all-cause mortality. And that's pretty achievable for most people. You don't need to be training all that much. That would even probably include some sort of lower velocity exercise, and we'll go over what actually increases your VO2 max later in this video. But yeah, it's not all that hard and very achievable to actually get that to even be above average, which we see that 2.75 times less risk of all-cause mortality. So yeah, something very interesting. That study then concluded increased cardiorespiratory fitness was associated with reduced long-term mortality over a decade with no observed upper limit of benefit. So what that means is there was no U shape or J shape, what we sometimes refer to in the literature as like when you do too much, you can go the other way where it's actually detrimental to your health. What they're saying with this is that you can't go too far with cardiovascular fitness and your ability to improve your longevity and health. So very, very interesting, and something that I have also shifted my focus with training in trying to actually increase my cardiorespiratory fitness to that of the elite category. So what that looks like for me on a weekly basis, I'm doing roughly 3 to 4 cardiovascular sessions. 2 of them are usually a lower aerobic zone type, so more longer but lower intensity. And then 2 of them are approaching either my lactic threshold or working to like what is classically a VO2 max training sort of protocol, where you take your heart rate to 90 to 95% of its heart rate max. So that's what I do personally. It is interesting to see what is actually, what is actually sort of suitable in the literature, and that really sort of fits that picture of we need to be in that higher intensity bracket to be able to gain the VO2 max benefits that we want. So I pulled up a study which was labeled aerobic high intensity intervals improve VO2 max more than moderate training. And so what they're talking about with this is the study basically broke down into 4 different categories of training. It was that 1 was long and slow distance of 70% of your heart rate max. 1 was your lactate threshold training of 85% of your heart rate max. The other ones, they used intervals, but basically the third one was 15 and 15. So meaning that it was 15 seconds in your 90 to 95% of your heart rate max, and then 15 seconds resting in that 70% of your heart rate max. The next one was the 4x4 minutes. So they're 4 minutes on 90 to 95% of their heart rate max. That is a very, very painful and brutal session. However, interestingly, we'll discuss that a little bit later. And then they followed that by 3 minutes active resting, or 70% of your heart rate max. Which one do you think was the most effective? It was the one that sucked the most.
Oh my No, God!
It was the one where people were doing 4 lots of 4 minutes at that 90 to 95% of your heart rate max. That would, in the CrossFit space, be referred to as a acid bath, where you'd feel like your body was on fire, basically. But you're basically redlining the body system. You're trying to get the heart rate up to near its max capacity and trying to sustain that for a long period of time. Very, very painful, but very, very, very beneficial. So if you're wanting to improve your VO2 max, that is the best kind of session. Now, these subjects were doing 3 sessions a week at this desired training protocol for 8 weeks. And what they found was that, obviously, as I mentioned, that the last 2, number 3 and number 4, were the most beneficial. But your 15 and 15 second interval, they improved their cardiorespiratory fitness. I did write it down. By 5.5% over that 8-week period. And then the one where they're doing the 4x4 minute intervals, they improved their VO2 max by 7.2% over that 8-week block. So yeah, very interesting. And so if you're wanting to train to improve your VO2 max, you should train to work towards your 90 to 95% of your heart rate max. So, and you should do that, what they did in this study, around 3 times a week. I would argue that you could, if you're aiming for just being above average, you could probably even do 2 sessions a week, and that would be more than enough. But if you're a perfectionist and you want to get the absolute benefit, then probably 3 times a week, it would be the optimal for that. As far as resistance training goes, as I said, with the study that I mentioned before, the meta-analysis in 2022, they've only got their participants going up to 60 minutes per week. And there is a reason for that. It's actually not known yet whether doing too much resistance training is actually not beneficial to the person. So then going back to that J-shaped curve where, doing too much is actually harmful. They're not sure. And I'm very probably skeptical of that fact. I think if you're taking everything into consideration, you've got your nutrition down packed, you've got your rest down packed, you're doing the sufficient amount of load for your body, like we spoke about in our last video, where you're getting the right amount of volume for your body and your adaptations. I don't think there's going to be that fact, but we just haven't analyzed it. So, I could be wrong, but for longevity purposes, at least in this study, 60 minutes per week is enough to see that longevity benefits of the percentage decrease in all-cause mortality being 27%. So, I suppose if you're wanting to package this all together in a nice summary, really you should be training at least 60 minutes per week with resistance training and pushing yourself to a relatively high level in that 6 to 12 rep mark of your 70 to 85% of your 1RM. And then with your VO2 max training, you should be doing 2 to 3 sessions of that. If you're wanting to get the most benefit, that 4x4 minutes, or 4 minutes hard and then 4 minutes easy. 2 to 3 times a week. So they're the best things that you can do to improve your longevity. In a sense that you also improve your longevity, but you also improve your quality of life. And that is probably the key thing. It's not necessarily about living for a long time. it is actually improving the quality of life that you live. And that is where my training has sort of geared towards now, as opposed to, training for purely muscle building or muscle strength. It's now, how can I live the best quality of life for a long period of time so that I can see my children, my children's children, grow up and still be able to play around with them and, and just be able to function on a daily basis, not get puffed going upstairs, be able to go out and kick the footy with some mates. I'm 27 now, but hopefully I'll still be able to do that when I'm in my 50s and 60s, and trying to maintain a level of fitness that I can do the things that I want to be able to do. I think Dr. Peter Attia summed up really well. He said some of the things that he gets his clients to focus on is actually training for their last decade in their life, and he called it the decathlon. And basically it's, what are 10 events that you want to be able to do in your last decade of life in order to live a high quality life? And it's an interesting question, and I think everybody should ask themselves that question. I know I certainly have. But yeah, I'll cap it off with that question and leave you to ponder that, and hopefully you enjoyed the video, and we'll see you in the next one. And yeah, look forward to it. Thank you.